Today's date is March 1st, 1994. I'm Blake Hailey, and we're making this videotape in the University of North Texas. And we're pleased to have with us today Dr. Robert Toulouse, Provost Emeritus here at the University of North Texas. Dr. Toulouse, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to meet with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I'd like, if we could, to start back with your early days at North Texas, perhaps even what brought you to the University of North Texas and your career up through now.
Well, I actually came to North Texas in the spring of 1948, directly from graduate school at the University of Missouri. I'd been in the military for 5 years during World War II and went to the University of Missouri to complete my doctorate. I was offered a job at North Texas, then North Texas State Teachers College, and took it. Came here and began teaching in the College of Education, then the School of Education. And in 1954, I became Dean of the Graduate School. Was Dean of the Graduate School for many years up till 1982, then became Vice President for Academic Affairs and then Provost. Retired.
Your first retirement?
Yes, retired the first time, and Dr. Hailey asked me to come back for a short period of time while a search was being conducted for another provost. I stayed for a year and a half that time and then retired again in 1990.
And that's when Blaine Brownell came in, and he's now the current provost?
Yes, Blaine was the replacement. We had a replacement for me in 1985, and I stayed on as a consultant and doing various activities for a short time after 1985, while the then new provost was getting adjusted to his position. And then he left the position after about 2.5 years, and that's when I was asked to come back.
And then you retired again?
Yes, I retired in 1990.
Well, there may be, you never know, there could be a third time.
I doubt that very seriously.
Years ago, back in the early 70s, if you could go into how you were approached by the Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine, which is now the UNT Health Science Center. What started all that, and how did you get involved with osteopathy?
Perhaps it would be appropriate for me to tell just a little bit what was going on at North Texas at the time, because I think that's perhaps appropriate for my interest in the developing relationship between the two institutions. For many years, North Texas had very few graduate programs. Then we saw an opportunity to develop very rapidly by participating in what we called the Federation of North Texas Area Universities. This I helped develop, involving 3 institutions: North Texas, East Texas, and Texas Woman's University, and it was a graduate relationship. This gave us an opportunity to develop programs for this area of Texas. So we're learning to work together with other institutions. Prior to that, we had North Texas. When I say we, I'm usually referring to North Texas. We belonged to what was then called the Inter-University Council, which included all the institutions in this region.
In the North
Private,
Texas?
yes, private universities, public universities, community colleges, TCOM. Later. But at that time, we did things together that would be appropriate for private and public institutions to work together. For example, the library. We developed a card by which students at any of the institutions could make use of the libraries of the other institutions. So we had a background of working with other institutions, and I think that's appropriate because when this is, I guess you would say, in the folklore of our two institutions, now then TCOM and North Texas, it seems that perhaps in 1971, toward the end of the year, perhaps late fall, or perhaps even into the beginning of 1972, one of our faculty members, Dr. Sylvie, J.K.G. Sylvie, and the then president of TCOM, I believe it was Henry Hard, were at a meeting together, and I don't really know where that occurred. It was certainly not in this region. I vaguely think it might have been New Orleans, or it could have been someplace else. Dr. Sylvie being our person who counseled pre-meds. And I think he was at this medical meeting to which your president had gone. That would have been, let's see, I believe you had your first enrollment class in 1970. And so this would have been perhaps just after the second class had started. And they were talking together, as I say, the folklore was in a bar, but you can, I don't know where it was, about the problems that TCOM was facing. It seemed that after the second class was admitted, it came time for TCOM to think about accreditation. And I suppose the director or the person in charge of accreditation for the American Osteopathic Association had scheduled a visit. President Hart, as I understand, and this again is hearsay, and perhaps this is the time for me to put a disclaimer. My memory, you remember, this goes back to over 20 years, and I'm seeing it from the standpoint of a person at the University of North Texas. At any rate, President Hart assumed there would be some problems because at that time the facilities for TCOM were quite limited. This goes back to the time when TCOM was housed in a converted bowling alley.
The infamous bowling alley.
But I would say, was there several times, that bowling alley was extremely well modified. And while we perhaps disparage it a little bit, it provided a very usable space. But nevertheless, it would appear that this would be a very difficult accreditation visit, particularly with reference to what I call the basic health sciences. And Dr. Sylvie said, well, we ought to be helping you with your basic health sciences. We have well-qualified faculty. As I understand it, many or most, or virtually all perhaps, of the faculty at TCOM at that time were part-time faculty and part-time practitioners. So that would have been, as I say, at the end of 1971 and 72, beginning of 72, and I believe in February of 1972 we had our first, I'd say, formal meeting. And from that, the University, North Texas, agreed to help in the instruction of the basic health sciences and a contract was worked out to begin in September of 1972. The contract, simply stated, was that North Texas would provide the offices, the classrooms, and the instructors, for the most part, for those courses.
For the basic sciences.
For the basic sciences. And we modified the biology building, the fourth floor of the biology building, to provide office space and other needs for instructing those classes. Now, the classes actually were held here at North Texas. Now, perhaps that's enough on this point, but the reason I got into it, as graduate dean and during this period in which we were working with the other institutions in the Federation of North Texas Area University, I had to write a great many proposals for new programs because we saw that as a real opportunity. The time was then, and if we acted then, we could be successful in getting the programs. I'm sure you understand that in order for us to start a program, we have to have the approval of the coordinating board for the state. So here, as I saw it, was just a real opportunity for us as a university to work with a medical school in some kind of a relationship, which was yet to be determined, that would make possible new graduate programs which would meet needs of additional students in the area through the offerings here at North Texas. So that's the reason I got involved in it. Now, I can go on and tell you more about those early days of those, how it worked, but perhaps that would better be delayed. Or
Go ahead, please. I'd like to know a little bit about the relationship at that point as far as how it progressed from there and some of the stumbling blocks that maybe you encountered in those years. I know there was a growing pains, I'm sure.
Yes, I wish I could say everything went beautifully, that there were no problems that ever developed. Everything was sweetness and light, but of course that wasn't the way it worked. The contract, we did the instruction virtually, I say virtually for nothing. We provided the instruction as my memory goes, and again I say this is from my memory. I believe for about $25,000 a semester.
$25,000.
And the total for the year was $50,000 for the instruction for the all the medical students. The two classes are at the time. I think that may have changed somewhat later, but that first year is the one I was remembering. I believe your first class had 20 students, and I think the second class may have had 35 or some such number. It was a few more.
I think you're right around 35 or 40, as I recall.
But I'm not sure. I just don't remember. From the North Texas standpoint, it was a question of how to take care of the faculty members that were doing the instructing. They already are full-time, so do you ask them to do more than full-time and not get additional pay? So one of the problems that we found immediately was how to pay the faculty, which we did eventually add some to their salary. There were certain ways of doing it legally, and of course we always did the legal approach. Right. But it did create some problems later because faculty members remembered the days when they got additional pay for doing this. Later, as time went on, the salary schedule at North Texas was not equal to the salary schedule at TCOM. Medical schools usually have a different way of compensating the faculty, And so that created problems over the years trying to do something that would be appropriate for the North Texas faculty that taught at TCOM and not throw out of kilter, if I might use that word, the salary schedules at North Texas. So that was one of the problems. But nevertheless, we did it. I think the instruction was excellent. As I remember those first scores on the medical tests that the TCOM students took, our students, TCOM students, were at the top of the other osteopathic medical schools. So we thought that the instruction at least was doing the job. You'll remember that at that time there were perhaps 10 osteopathic medical schools. Of course, there are quite a few more now, but 16 I believe 17. We were either the 10th, you were either the 10th or the 11th. I don't remember which it was, but it was around 10 at any rate. Of course, there were always problems. The building didn't get done in time. Their classroom were never just all that they could be, but as I say, the instruction did get carried out, and I think very effectively.
So there was some tension between the faculties at UNT and TCOM as far as salaries go.
Well, there at first, you see, really the only, I believe the contract specified, and again, I didn't go back and check this, but my memory is that the chairman, the department chair of each of the areas had to be a person at TCOM. And the teaching faculty could be TCOM or North Texas. So there at first, there wasn't tension, it was just a problem. It became a bit of a problem later as we had people at TCOM teaching North Texas students and North Texas faculty teaching TCOM, and the two scales were different. That was a problem. Of course, all of these can be solved if you really want to, but that was a minor problem at any rate.
Were there some other challenges that you faced as you were starting to build this relationship with TCOM as it was starting to become a state-funded institution?
Yes, it's kind of interesting as I recall, how the two institutions got together. It might be appropriate to bring it up at this time. When we had this contract, I saw this as an opportunity for North Texas to get a new department and some new programs. So I wrote a proposal to establish a Department of Basic Health Sciences at North Texas. We needed some kind of a vehicle to use as a department for the TCOM faculty when they worked with North Texas students. And they could have been in the biological sciences, but it seemed appropriate to identify them a little more specifically. And so I asked for a Department of Basic Health Sciences. And while I was at it, I thought, well, we might as well ask for a master's degree in that, in the basic health sciences. One of the things that I found, and I was very uninformed on osteopathic medicine, when this contract was developing and I was writing this proposal, I found that I needed a lot of information in a hurry. And so I went over to our library and got a whole stack of books and tried to absorb as much as possible, as fast as possible. The gist of it was that we did prepare the proposal for a department and for a program, and it was approved. This was approved, I think, about perhaps into 1973. I'm not absolutely certain of the date there, but in the process, there was a committee that was studying medical education in Texas that had been appointed by the governor. And I don't believe it was a coordinating board. I believe it was a governor. And they came up with the recommendation. No, I'm wrong. I believe that was the coordinating board. They came up with the recommendation in approving this Department of Basic Health Sciences that TCOM and North Texas should formally study the possibility of the two institutions forming a closer relationship. I believe that may have been the wording. And so that would have been 1973, after the contract was in effect and we were doing the instructing and some of the instructing, and the classes were on our campus.
The first 2 years.
Yes. And so at that time, after we were then approved, I think that would have been perhaps at the April meeting again of 1973. And during the next year, we began to think of ways that we might come together. This committee that had studied medical education had suggested this arrangement. They had suggested that Texas A&M work with Baylor and that Texas Tech have a medical school. And that other than that, there be no more new medical schools in Texas. Now this, as I say, goes back to that period. So we were charged with, formally, with trying to find an arrangement that would work. And I wish I could say that it was based on sound educational principles as to what the relationship would be, but actually, and again I'm speaking perhaps as an individual and from the standpoint of North Texas, the thing that governed it was finance.
Money.
Money.
Key thing.
The thing. At that time, the higher educational institutions of Texas were given building money through a tax that was specifically designed for buildings, but they had to be new buildings. As we looked at your needs, remember now, your TCOM was in the bowling alley. And as we looked at our needs here on the campus, several years without any buildings, and the enrollments growing rapidly and doctoral programs being developed rapidly and requiring special facilities, it seemed that there would be no way that we could bring our two institutions together and enjoy the returns from the building amendment as the two institutions when it really wouldn't even provide enough for North Texas.
Right.
So a legal way was worked out that finally became the method by which our two institutions would work together, and that was that you would, at TCOM, remain a separate institution, but be under the same board.
Board of Regents?
Under the same Board of Regents. Texas Tech, for example, did it a little differently. The University of Texas has always had separate medical schools within the system. So in effect, we established a small system consisting of the TCOM, the College of Osteopathic Medicine, and the university. This, as I say, became the pattern that we felt we had to follow. The other kind of interesting thing at the time, this would have been into the summer of '74, as I recall, Dr. Nolan was our president at the time.
C.C. Nolan, right?
Yes, C.C. Jitter Nolan. And he saw this as an excellent opportunity, too, for both institutions. It was pretty well, I think, accepted that it was almost impossible for TCOM to remain a separate institution and not related to any university. That pattern just didn't seem like a successful approach to good medical education over the long run. And so he felt that we should get together, and I just remember George Lubel's name as the
one of the founders.
One of the founders. I don't remember the names of the other. There were 7 or 8, I believe, and but George I do remember as being more related to us at North Texas than perhaps some of the others. So Dr. Nolan thought, well, I'll just write a letter and say, we've studied this, and it seems that we ought to work together by having a single Board of Regents. So he wrote a letter, I think about a half page, and sent it down to the coordinating board and hoped that that was all it would take. This, as I say, would have been, I think, in the summer, or at the end of the summer.
74?
Of 74. So he was in Austin sometime after that letter had gone down, and my office had a call from him saying that that letter wasn't sufficient. The coordinating board wanted a formal request, and they wanted it now because this was on a Friday afternoon, as I recall, and the agenda with all the materials would go out to the board members. This was on a Friday, sometime, I think, before Thursday of the next week. And he said, get busy, or words to that effect.
You had to move quickly then.
So from Friday to Thursday, this is what we did, including asking for a new administrative unit, again going through the same questions. The coordinating board had 2 sets of questions. One was known as the 30 questions, which you had to answer if you wanted a new program, and the 11 questions if you wanted a new department. So we used the 11 and put a lot of material with it. And it did go out, and it was approved, and the coordinating board at its next meeting there approved it, and I believe the first appropriation, formal appropriation, was in 1975. Whenever the legislature met the next time. I believe prior to that, there was a time in which the state treated it as a private institution, I think very similarly to the way it treated Baylor, and I don't know whether it still treats Baylor Medical School. Certain number of dollars for each student.
Certain amounts of money per student.
Per capita.
Okay, allocated.
Yes. So that's my memory of what happened during those the very early years there of our getting together. Of course, once we were both under the same board, then a new set of issues evolved.
That's where I want to go now. Now you're in 75, the fall of 75. You're, if you will, married TCOM and what was then called North Texas State University. What happened then? What trials and tribulations did you have to go through then in those few years?
Well, we needed to learn to work together, and there were times when I think we forgot each other and went about our business. A new building was being built, the Med Ed 1, and
there goes the old bowling alley. I guess.
yes, and of course the problem then became what's going to remain at North Texas and what's going to go down to Fort Worth.
You had to move some degrees in faculty.
The degrees were not a problem because the degrees, you at TCOM were the only ones authorized to do the DO. And at that time we were the only institution authorized to do anything beyond that. So the reason I thought this basic health sciences degree program might be good is that in all that studying to prepare this, one of the criticisms of the training was, of osteopathic training at that time, was that there was too little research for the students in the program. So we thought that by taking this basic health sciences degree, using the first 2 years of medical school as part of the degree program, the coursework part, and putting in what I called a research part that would start after the summer of the first year and not go through the second year, but then would pick up again at the end of the second year. In other words, we didn't think the students could do research and all the medical education at the same time.
Right. Oh, okay.
But during the summer, when they were not involved in the medical part of it, for the most part at that time, would be a good time for the research block.
Right.
And then to complete the research in 1 year after that. And so that was the basis for that. Of course, the degree still was conferred by North Texas, but it would be conferred at the same time as the DO. That was the original one. Of course, in the meantime, we had other students, additional students, that were in the program, not just the medical students. So one of our problems was to learn to work together. It seemed early on that one of the things that made sense was to try to have joint departments. For example, we had a degree in biochemistry and had certain requirements. The medical school had requirements in biochemistry. We could have approached it one of two ways. We could have had 3 or 4 faculty members at TCOM and maybe 3 or 4 at North Texas, 2 very small departments, not able to make much of a showing.
Right.
Or we could have 1 department of 6 or 8 and have some specializations that wouldn't have been possible under the 2 small approaches. So one of our early efforts was to have a joint department. There were lots of problems connected with doing the single joint department. It seemed like each time we turned around there was another issue that needed to be worked on. So that was one of the problems. Still, that department became one of the best departments, not only at North Texas, but at TCOM, the single department.
Right.
So I thought it was a good idea. There was also the problem of how the medical faculty, because by now you at TCOM as a state institution began to be funded in the same way other medical schools were funded, and the formulas produced rather generous amounts of dollars. So faculty that would have major and maybe only assignment at one institution, that would be TCOM.
Right.
One of the other problems we've always had was joint assignment, joint appointment, payment. And so that was an issue over the years. One of the things that occurred, I think, a couple of years after we came under the same board was a directive from the board that we would work together. It
No, no
it
option.
wasn't a choice.
Right.
And so we formed what was called the Joint Work Group. Later became NTEC, and that would be North Texas, Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine Educational Coordinating Committee. And various issues, various joint programs were planned. We did a lot more talking than acting, I think, but we did some acting. For example, I think we have certain programs even now. I haven't checked in the last few years, so I'm not absolutely certain. In aging, I believe there's a joint appointment of a person in that area, maybe more than one.
I'd have to check, and I think there are a couple, yes.
Yes, and so there were other issues of that type, but this joint work group, NTEC, was supposed to meet once a month, and we alternated meeting at North Texas and TCOM. About half a dozen faculty members from each institution met monthly or at least periodically, and tried to really work together in all the ways that we saw that might be appropriate.
Also, you had a problem too, didn't you, of the campuses being split, where you were training students at North Texas the first 2 years and then bringing them down here for the next two. Was that also somewhat of a problem, the split siding of the campuses?
Well, the major problems developed during the time immediately following the period that all of the training was done at North Texas, and then the new Med-Ed 1 at that time, at Med-Ed 1, when the students started to going there. Yes, there were problems, and there were fewer and fewer needs for the med students to come over to North Texas. And so the faculty then started doing the traveling, and then of course we developed various laboratories, and certain of your faculty at TCOM wanted to have labs at North Texas, and so that became something of an issue. We've always had a problem on contracts with each other.
Starting with 50,000 and working out.
Yes, and for many years it seemed we didn't have a really good way of determining how to compensate the instruction that the faculty at TCOM did, an individual instructing. That, by that I mean directing the research of a doctoral student at North Texas, directing a dissertation of a doctoral student at North Texas, and the appropriate number of dollars to give TCOM for that purpose. So at first we had just a general contract that sent X number of dollars, whatever it was, to TCOM in general, rather than to a certain faculty member or even to a certain department. And that created some problems at TCOM because the faculty members felt that they were instructing free. We felt that we were buying services and were sending dollars, but they didn't get to the place that was actually doing the instruction.
So a lot of the problems that you had really stem from the financial part of it, not so much personalities and so forth. The basic bottom line was dollars and cents.
Yes, and of course that's always true, because you never have you never have enough dollars to do all the things that need to be done, and you're always using up materials and having to replace them in research. Somebody has to buy the materials, and unless there's compensation both ways, there are problems.
Are there some other things that you can think of that you encountered? I'm sure a lot of happy moments too during all this changing around. What were some of the things you remember in that respect?
Well, of course, I was extremely pleased with Med Ed 1. I thought, what a wonderful facility. Going from the bowling alley to this
nice
very excellent facility, which actually was far better than any that we had on our campus. I was delighted to see that, because I thought that anything that would bring recognition to TCOM spilled over onto both of our institutions. So and then of course the Med Ed 2 and then your library. I was very, very pleased with the facilities. I thought that our steps of our accomplishments were rather modest, but every time that we accomplished some little something together, I felt good about it, because my own philosophy is that you get more by working together than competing.
Oh, definitely.
And so any way that I saw that we could work together, I was trying to do whatever needed to be done to make it possible for that to occur.
You know, now that we're the University of North Texas Health Science Center, which is a nice name and
Yes.
helps you, your institution, and the Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine. Do you recall back in, I believe it was 79, 80, somewhere along in there, when the name was put up
Yes, I do.
on the side of the building that said North Texas State and all? Do you remember anything about that? That was maybe a 2-week stint.
It didn't last very long, because some legislator drove by. I think this is again the folklore. Somebody drove by, and the word got down to Austin very quickly, and somebody sent word to our president to do something about that right away. And as you say, I think it lasted maybe a couple of weeks. However, this was done through what was thought to be legal. It wasn't just somebody sticking the sign up. There was more to it than that. However, at the time, I think the coordinating board did not want to approve any additional health science centers, and they didn't want even the appearance of a new health science center. Yes, I remember.
So now you worked along through all that and then retired as things were just starting to take shape. If you could, you also came back and you were a provost, and did you have a little hand in perhaps helping it become a health science center? You mentioned earlier you helped select some of the administration and so forth.
Well, I was on the joint committee that was doing the search for your dean, Dean Cohen, as it finally turned out during my second, should I say, tour of duty. I was on that committee, and I think one of the last, I remember going over and interviewing Dean Cohen when he came to the area for that purpose. So, yes, I do recall that.
Where are some of the things, what would you like to see, if I could get you to project in the future for me? Where do you see this, now the UNT Health Science Center and the University of North Texas, where do you see this marriage going now? Are there some things you'd like to see done between the two institutions?
Given the kinds of programs that we have, and of course the programs that naturally occur with a medical school, I think there should be, at least for a period of time, some ways in which major research activities can take place. I think it's a more mature relationship than we had certainly in the earlier years. We have two institutions, two more mature institutions, that should be able to have research that could attract national attention or international attention, perhaps. there are programs that we ought to be able to do together. For example, we tried during 1984, I believe, perhaps 83 and 4, to have a Master of Public Health program, the two institutions. And we did, I don't know how much work trying to get ready for that, and did indeed actually have a visiting committee come and look at us. It was just a year or 2 or 3 early from TCOM standpoint, because the Department of Public Health was either in its infancy or did not yet exist. I don't remember which. And some of the other things that we had to do were just not quite strong enough to get approval of the program. I understand that that's still in the mill, and of course I do think there's a place for joint programs, medically related programs, that the two institutions would have a stronger impact than either one individually.
I'm curious, do you have some other remarks? I have another question for you, but I want to save it for a few minutes. But I want to ask if there's any remarks. I know we've covered a lot of things in a very short time that we asked for you today, and I wonder for some things I've missed. I'm sure there's tons of things. Are there a couple things you can think of?
Actually, I suppose not. They all are related to what we've already talked about. The Dr. Margaret Dennis, who was the wife of the president of TCOM, worked with my office during the time that we were starting this joint work group. She was a joint appointment person. And that, I think, worked rather well, because it was a relationship that...
very close relationship.
Yes, that she had an interest in pursuing, and knew both institutions well. Margaret had gotten her degree at North Texas many years ago before she went to Kirksville, and I later married Dr. Willard. So many of the activities are associated with that work group, and I wish that we could have been more successful. I think we had too many growing pains really to be as successful as I would have liked, but at least the possibilities were there, and we did do some of them.
And I hope that you're pleased with what you see today, perhaps.
Oh, I'm delighted with what I see today. This was the final, this is what we hoped for when we started this process back in the 1970s, to have a health science center in Fort Worth. That kind of a center makes it possible for North Texas, as the university, to do certain things that it couldn't do in the Fort Worth area. And from a very practical standpoint, you have legislative interest expanded for both of our institutions.
Right. And it puts you on a good level with the other universities that have medical schools, and other professional schools.
That's right.
Now, I know you're thinking, well, this is probably about it, but my one question I have for you is, what do you plan to do now? Now that you've retired twice, third time's a charm, they say, so they're still, what are you planning on doing from here on out?
Well, more of the same, I suppose. We started traveling many years ago, and of course have done a great deal of traveling, and we'll continue that. And I'm working in the community in various church and library and service clubs and so on, and my wife too. So we remain fairly active and busy.
And I noticed from your information too that you raise a lot of African violets. You still keeping your hand raising the greenhouse? I understand that's quite an undertaking.
Yes, I have a greenhouse, and we do are quite interested in plants. And I haven't completely severed my relationship with North Texas. I'm a member of the of the UNT Foundation Board, and we meet occasionally.
Do you ever wonder, I'm sure you wonder how you had time to work with all the things you're doing now.
Well, that's the other way around. I rather understand now what happened. We just didn't do all the things that we should have done when I was working in Virginia too, because my wife is Virginia. She was quite active in all kinds of affairs, and so we let many things that could have been done undone.
Dr. Toulouse, I do appreciate you taking the time to meet with us. I know that the University of North Texas is indebted to you for your help, all those many, many years and the excellent service you provided, and obviously will continue to provide from here on out on the foundation. I know that TCOM and what is now the UNT Health Science Center could not have made a lot of its changes without your help, and I know the administration, everyone owes you a lot down there as well. I want to thank you for all your help, and from my end, it was a definite pleasure to interview such a dynamic person as yourself. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us.
Thank you very much.
And again, I really appreciate it. And with that, we will close this interview. Thank you, and have a nice day.